A beautiful, powerful conversation with a beautiful, powerful man, Max Bichman, where we're going to talk about unleashing the power of masculinity in life, love, and sex. Welcome, Max. So wonderful to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I'm just going to introduce Max to you, and then we're going to dive into this juicy conversation. So Max supports men worldwide to unleash the true power of their masculinity in life, love, and sex. He is the host of Heart of a King podcast and author of Your Honor Code. From Munich, Germany, Max's journey began in a conservative environment where he experienced severe domestic violence, suppression of emotions, and other toxic expressions of masculinity from a very young age. Early on, he committed to never becoming a man like this. And after hitting rock bottom in 2012, he has committed his life to bring mature, empowered, and heart-based masculinity onto the planet, creating a safe space for feminine energy and allowing for healthy and fulfilling relationships and sexuality. Having healed, heart-centered individuals become the empathetic and powerful leaders of the new age. Wow. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So powerful, so important, and so needed. And we're going to be having a beautiful deep dive into this in just a minute. And before we begin, we want to be really clear that we are talking in this conversation to men who are attracted to women. But of course, there's a lot of golden nuggets and powerful information that can be inclusive to everyone. But we're going to be focusing our conversation on those men specifically. So beautiful. And I'm so glad you're here because I've been doing a lot of this work, privately behind the scenes with my husband. I've been with my husband for 23 years, and we have done a lot of work behind the scenes, but it's not really something I've spoken about publicly so much. So I thought this was a really nice opportunity to share a little bit more about my life, what's going on behind the scenes. My area of expertise is around money. I'm the author of Money Manifestation Mastery, and also known as the Abundance Activator. So my area of specialty is around money and power, and sexuality comes into it, but it's been a bit more behind the scenes in my business. Max specializes in sex and power. And so we thought it'd be a really great conversation to bring that in to my audience as well. So thank you so much. So of course, behind the scenes in my marriage and being married to a man and our sex life, we've had to work through a lot of things. We've had times where we were really both very unfulfilled sexually, very unsatisfied sexually, not meeting each other. We loved each other, we had kids together, everything in our life on the surface was like good, and like great man, great relationship. But there was a place where we really were not connecting, and both of us felt really alone. And there was an aspect of ourselves in that relationship that wasn't being met. And it was incredibly frustrating, very sad. And it caused both of us really to withdraw and then turn away from each other and focus on marriage. Him focusing on work, me focusing on kids, but really struggling to connect. So we've done a lot of work on that, but I was wondering if we should maybe begin by talking about what are some of the pain or the challenges that the men that you're working with are experiencing when it comes to their love life or their sex life, themselves. Like what have you noticed?
There's plenty of things we can talk about there. I think first of all, the biggest challenge that I see men go through with this is this fear of not being enough in sex as well. It shows up everywhere. It's the biggest fear of the masculine on the planet, but it, especially as sex is the most vulnerable part, the most vulnerable stage for that, it really shows up, and that ends up surfacing in, for example, let's say performance anxiety, of like quote unquote performing in the bedroom, and just all that stuff ends up in being inauthentic. And what sexuality really is the deepest level of intimacy if we approach it in the right way, so to say. And all that is in the way of intimacy. If one person, let's say the man, is up in his head thinking about what he has to do, if he's good enough, and all that pressure that lies upon him there, that takes him out of the present moment, out of his body, and out of the connection with his partner. So that is, for example, one root thing that I see there. And, you know, in relationships, we probably everybody that has worked a bit with relationship dynamics and addressed some things in their own relationship knows that codependent relationships are still quite the norm in society. It's this your other half, your better half type of mentality, which is quite disempowering and is asking for trouble. But in sexuality, this is the same thing. Most people are not fully met by themselves sexually, because sexual needs are not a nice to have. It is a human base need. It is not a nice to have. It is a real valid need. And often we don't meet ourselves sexually. So we're trying to get, there's also this word often, men are often saying this, trying to get sex. So it's like taking it from someone, you know, it's like you have to get it outside of yourself because you cannot fill that battery up with yourself. But you can, but most men haven't learned how to. And that's where we could get into the whole topic of pornography and dysfunctional sexual programming. But let's stay with this topic for a moment. So
well, yeah, that's really powerful. So there's a sense of like trying to get that sense of completion from the other. So trying to get sex or take sex or hope and pray someone will give you sex, and sort of looking outside of yourself.
Yes.
And then that can manifest itself, of course, in things like porn or affairs or all this stuff that we see in
for example,
and yeah, so bits before we go into like the deeper things, what are some, like, because I know that what I know with a lot of people is we might have these pains or problems or challenges in our lives that are manifesting themselves in our life, but not necessarily understanding the deeper workings of it. But what are some of like the pain that men are like suffering in silence about when their needs aren't being met?
When their needs aren't being met by the woman, or how do you mean?
Yeah, but it's obviously that there's deeper issues going on there, but like, because I think what I've noticed that men seem to be less able to communicate what's going on for them, and they're kind of quietly suffering. And I'm wondering if there's anything else just to help any men listening to this, that they're not alone in that.
Oh, I can definitely tell you. So that's such a big part of the programming of how men are programmed these days, how we are all programmed. Like men are not like, you know, there's been women's circles for, you know, ages, but the men are just now really starting to come together in a conscious way and actually speak about their pain, their emotions, their vulnerability, their struggles. And most men still don't do it. And I didn't do it in the past, but that is one thing, the suffering in silence. That's why also 80% of all suicides on the planet are male. That is crazy, because it's just this load of emotional pain, struggles, insecurity, fears that is never talked about, because it would be considered weakness by the conditioning of society. And that is one thing that really shows up why men don't talk about that. And then we can talk about what are some of the most common pains that men are experiencing. Like I said, the fear of not being enough is huge. And if you look at, for example, it can show up in so many ways. You know, maybe you've heard of this high performance approach, when people like dive into self-development, but they kind of stay on the surface and they really, really go for that. They're trying to manage and cope with the traumas coming up, but they're not addressing them really in the depths. They're really trying to perform in business, getting so many women and all of that stuff to prove themselves that they're enough. And that is like such a deep thing that is rarely talked about, and most men are not even aware of it, but it shows up in so many ways. And another thing that is super common these days is that in sexuality, men are not fully self-confident. If you look at how common premature ejaculation is these days, it's like an epidemic. So I think the average time a man lasts during penetration and sex is just a few minutes, 3 to 5 minutes. And a woman needs about like 20 minutes for her body to get like aroused, to go towards like deeper levels of orgasm. And that you see the gap already. And that causes a man, of course, to feed that fear of not being enough, you know? And that is such a deep thing. Sexuality is like really the most vulnerable, deep aspect of relationships and in general. So, and that carries over into a lack of that and other things, a lack of clarity of what it even means to be a man these days, and a lack of knowing who they really are, what their values are, and more things cause them to have low confidence, trying to compensate it in many ways, not showing it, keeping the masks of masculinity. Yeah? There's this book from Brian Lewis, or what was his name? Lewis House. With all the masks all the masks men are carrying, and they're trying to hide themselves behind those masks. So that is so much suffering already by not being able to be authentic, hiding behind those masks to be seen as a man. You know? And the last thing
go ahead.
The last thing I want to add in this one, in this part, is most men, including me when I grew up, never had the opportunity to truly cross the threshold from immature boy psychology to real self-responsible, empowered man psychology. And that shows up in so many problems. You can see it like from people being unfulfilled to, you know, fights in relationships to war in the world. When immature men become to be in a position of power and they are actually not ready for it. But also every single man can feel this pressure, this stress, this overwhelm from having the responsibilities and the requirements of a man. But inside, never been really shown what it really means these days to be a man and how to embody that and to leave the boy behind and to really cross that threshold. In the past, there used to be rites of passage ceremonies, and in indigenous cultures, they still practiced around the whole world. That means it's like a coming of age ceremony. So when boys get to be at a certain age, they have to go through that ritual. And for example, it includes someone going to nature, like the wilderness, with, for example, a knife or something, and they have to go there and be there for an extended period of time by themselves, survive, fulfill their base needs, create safety for themselves, maybe even fulfill a purpose, like hunting something or something else, you know? And that is like designed by nature, because all these different cultures around the world for thousands of years, they didn't come up for this with the same type of thing in other ways by chance. In my opinion and experience, this is part of how the divine and how nature has designed this. But today in modern day society, I grew up in a society where this is not the thing anymore. You don't have to do it. Even if you don't go to work, if you don't serve anything in the world, you most of the time will still have a roof over your head, food on your plate, water to drink, and all that stuff. So there's this cushion of like safety, you know, like it's like just, and then you turn 18 or 21, depending where you're at, and you just get handed your adulthood, your quote unquote manhood, but you're not there. And that causes so much trouble. And that is one of the biggest root causes of so much problems, why so many men face over and over the same problems in their life, most obvious often in relationships, even when changing partners. Stuff just keeps showing up. So that one's huge. And this is also why I address this part in my retreat by facilitating a modern day rites of passage, where you cross that threshold, leave the boy behind and truly get initiated into this new part, you know, and this new version of yourself, into this mature, empowered version where you really tap into that primal, instinctive power.
Amazing. So the other thing I've really witnessed with particularly like guys, you know, actually I wonder if you could share a little bit about your story. Like you,
yeah, for sure,
in violence, around violence. So you made the decision not to be that man, right? Yeah. So I call it like the nice guy syndrome. You were trying to be nice. So what was the impact? So when you were like, I don't want to be that guy, what did you do to yourself around your masculinity, around your power to not be that guy?
That's an amazing question. So for me, just to elaborate a little bit on this, when I grew up in a household where there was not talked about emotions, sexuality, any of that. It was all suppressed. And my father was really violent towards me from a very young age. Like we're talking 3.5 years being like punched and slapped in the face, like full on. And that was like almost like a daily thing. So I grew up around that violence and seeing also that violence towards my mother and all that stuff. So for me, as a tapped in, sensitive, empathetic being, that was quite some drama to go through that afterwards. So that was intense. So it was, I can remember like moments when I was like, I'm not gonna be that guy. I'm not going to be that guy. And he was literally, I can remember things when he was projecting his trauma onto me, saying like you're a piece of crap, we're not worth anything, blah, 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 all this stuff, like just passing down what was done upon to him, because he did the best he could. I'm like, at some point I confronted him with all of this, and then he asked for forgiveness, and now we're like on really clear terms with this. But I just know that he couldn't do any better. He had stuff like that done onto him, his father onto him, his father onto him, and so on. So that's ancestral trauma, and it just gets passed down until one person is like spiritually or soul-wise mature enough to deal with it. And also the tools haven't been as present as they are today. Today, if you want to work on your traumas, you can do it. You'll find ways and facilitators and healers to go through that. Back then, that wasn't even a thing. So how did I get into changing that? First of all, of course, I was a boy, I was abused, I was just like terrified. So I just made that choice and was super clear to me. And then I had this phase, of course, where I was not addressing it. Like, I won't say like, yeah, I was having that realization as a little boy and then I was crushing it. No, I was fucking it up. I was like, as a teenager in my early 20s, like 21, I was just smashing myself with alcohol, party, and all that stuff. And then that was when I really hit rock bottom with all that, because I was just trying to numb all the pain that was there. I couldn't deal with it. Like, I was just doing what most people were doing, which was, party and bullshit. And I had many outlets for that, even like was seeking a creative outlet. I did graffiti, like kind of like, vandalism, but also like creative and all that stuff. But then I hit that rock bottom moment. I was an alcoholic with 19 already, and then at some point it just, so much stuff came together. I was living together with a girlfriend. She kicked me out. A lot of friends were pissed off at me. My family was pissed off at me. I was just fucked up, but then I had to turn things around, and that's what I started, and bit by bit, first like health-wise, nutrition, fitness, the surface level things, I would say, or like the most obvious things. But then soon, and like in 2013, I started with meditation and looking at masculinity and all that stuff, So that's when I started this whole journey, which then really led me to travel around the world and work with shamans, healers, mentors, men that specifically address helping other men. Found some amazing mentors there, tapped pretty early into this whole men's work scene that is now growing like crazy, and have some really good friends in there. So, and then 2020, I was ready, like years before I wanted kind of to do it, but I knew it wasn't time yet. And 2020, I then started to be a coach in this area. I was first a guest coach in, it's called Man Tribe. It was like a Californian men's circle, one of the first bigger ones. And it was when I was like a guest coach there for sexuality, sexual mastery. And then a year later, I started to have my first retreat. And shortly after that, I launched my program where I help men, reconnect with their heart, with their emotions, also their power, deal with their fears and shadows and all that stuff as a foundation, and then go into relationships and sacred sexuality. So a conscious approach to sex and tantra and all that good stuff.
Amazing.
So that's how I got there. And
what a journey. So what I'm aware of is there are so many men who are suffering in silence, doing their best, trying to be the provider, or making the money, or making the woman happy, or stuck in these, or maybe there's habits of behavior like alcohol, drugs, porn, overworking, they feel like shame about, but don't really know how to break. What do they need to know? Like, what is this sort of, maybe they're starting to work a little bit on themselves, but what I'm aware of is that you have it's almost like there's a whole other world ready and available for men when it comes to sex, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to being a man in the world. What would you say that that man who's really suffering in silence and shame and fear, what would be a really like important thing for him to know about his struggles right now?
Absolutely. So thanks for that question. So if you are listening to this as a man, first of all, I want to let you know you are not alone, brother. You are not alone in this one. Billions of men around the world are suffering in all these things. And the things we often think, oh, we're so this unique snowflake, and it's just me that everybody else is fine. No, this is so common. So many things, like premature ejaculation, approach anxiety with women, performance anxiety. It's like almost like 90+% of men are suffering with this. There's so many. And so first of all, I want to let you know you're not alone. And second of all, I want to let you know you're enough. You don't have to like prove the world that you're enough by hustling and grinding and putting some like outside stuff, quote unquote success out there and showcasing yourself on social media every day to try to prove that you're enough. You are enough by being you. Your beingness is enough. Because as masculine beings, we often identify too much with what we do. But we are called human beings and not human doings. You probably heard that one, but it's so true. So that is huge. And the second thing that I want to let you know is that if you're this man that's already trying to work on himself, you're really someone that I want to honor, because that intention is already a lot when you're already also willing to commit to it and truly take action. But what I see, especially with men who want to live up to their potential, have a healthy and fulfilled relationship and a sex life that really is satisfying themselves and their partner, but they're still finding themselves in these situations and in like fights with their partner, in like drama, in trying to please her. It's just also from this fear that I spoke about, and all this stuff, even though they're doing the work, quote unquote. In my experience, the struggle is because of that. The first thing is they're trying to fix it, which is also very like a shadow masculine, immature boy approach, to fix it, especially through the mind. And then do things like, consuming content, reading books, listening to podcasts, going to workshops, meditating, which are all great things. But all these things are used to manage and cope with all this trauma, lack of like mature masculine initiation, all the deep fears and stuff. And they're therefore not addressing the root cause. So I want to let you know that when you're suffering and you think you do the work already, it's great in honoring that and honoring the intention behind it and the willingness to step forward and to take action. But at the end of the day, these things will not transform you. They're there to regulate yourself in everyday life. But what's truly needed to be addressed are your deepest fears that are rooted underneath the stuff, your suppressed emotions that for men is still, we can talk about in a moment, such an important topic, because emotions are so judged with men still. And all that stuff, like that, your traumas, these things, they have to be addressed. And, then the second thing that I see also is like, it's so human. Avoidance is very human. Denial is very human, but it's a very, very common thing that as part of this, what I just described, it's an avoidance of taking true full-on self-responsibility. Like you're responsible for where you're at in your life. I know there's stuff happened, but I'm responsible for where I am in my life. Even the ancestral trauma that was passed down onto me, I am responsible to deal with it. I cannot blame, because blaming is giving our power away. We're giving the power to something else, someone else. So the second thing is, I want to let you know, if you want to break free from all these struggles, and if you want to be in your masculine power and manifest that life, that love life, that sex life that you really want, then you have to take full self-responsibility. You have to make a true commitment, not just a want or nice to have, to change that and step into action.
100%. Can we talk about men and feelings?
Absolutely. Just recently,
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about this in our house, which is like kind of, we're calling it defrosting feelings, and how like men and feelings, and why it's so hard for men to feel their feelings. Can we talk a bit about that? What would you like to talk about?
Oh,
Men and feelings.
oh, definitely. I can tell you a common situation from my childhood as a metaphor for this. So I was sometimes, let's say, getting beaten, being on the ground, and then wanting to cry. Well, my father would say, stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about. And that's something that if you, the men listening, if you have been physically abused in your childhood or not, but this is the vibe of that was transported down from the collective masculine trauma. Because why would that father do that to his child? Well, for one, he's not in his heart, he's not in his empathy, he is very immature emotionally himself. Otherwise, you could not do that if you would be there. You cannot. And the other thing, they are wildly afraid of feeling. It's just like, you probably noticed as a woman, most men are just overwhelmed and cannot deal with emotions. They cannot hold them because they never learn how to, and because the emotions. Now this is the key point. There's two things that really make emotion, which is emotion, energy in motion, life force energy. There's not good and bad emotion. There's just emotion, divine fucking energy that is flowing and expressing itself. And once it's flowing like a clear river, it's all good and healthy. You know, there's healthy expressions of anger and everything. But once it gets either judged, if there's judgment, or if there's fear, stuff gets stuck. That river gets stagnated, polluted, dirty, stuck. And is when things become toxic and things, you know, cannot move. And I can tell you, like, I was not able to cry properly until I was like, until like 4 years ago or something, or 5 years ago, I was not able to fully cry. And just like 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, I learned to fully hold all my emotions to their full extent, including my traumas, and hold space therefore as well be able to hold space for others. So that is the thing. The emotions are so judged for men. Like the only emotion from like there's 4 base emotions, you know, like joy, sadness, anger, fear, and you could put sexual energy in there as well as a 5th one. But from these base emotions, you know, the sexual energy is all happening underground. We're going to talk about that later or soon. But the only emotion from these, this is really like societally accepted, quote unquote, by men, is anger. It's like, yeah, that's manly, whatever. But it's just as fucking manly to cry your eyes out in the arms of a brother, to be afraid of stuff, or to be fucking joyful like a little child, you know? This is just as manly as, you know, anger coming through. So that is the thing. There's so much judgment placed upon it, and there's never a safe space for emotion. Because until a being can learn how to hold a safe space for their emotions, it would be ideal if it would be modeled by their parents as an infant. If they notice, oh, wow, mommy and daddy are expressing their emotions, they're having healthy expressions of their emotions, they're holding me and my emotions, being there for me in a way, you know, like nothing of that stuff is judged, and I experience a safe space held, and emotions being something like that is part of life, that is okay. But it's in the other, like how it really plays out is quite the opposite, like I shared, and especially for men. Definitely women have their struggles as well. I heard from women as well that their mothers were judging their emotions and their sexuality like crazy as well. So not like invalidating women's struggles there, but just saying it's so common for men, you know. So, and judgment and fear is what's blocking it. And when you never learn how to let go of the judgment, be in full acceptance, you know, unconditional acceptance with these emotions, have empathy for yourself, and to learn how to overcome your fear. Also the fear of feeling fully fucking alive. I hope I'm not saying fuck too often in this one, but I'm just like real. I have to bleep it out maybe. So, but you know what I mean? It's just like, once I started to be able to cry like for real and feel everything through to the full extent, also another level of joy and sexual bliss started opening up for me. I was like, oh, heaven, yes, this is good. So And now I don't mind crying at all. So I just, you know, play some music, go for nature when I'm processing something emotional, and I'm, you know, holding that space for myself. And I think it's very beautiful and feel really alive in all the emotions. And that's what I wish for men to have that as well. And the way you can get there is really to find someone that can hold that space for you and that can guide you into that empowerment of how you can feel, hold, express all your emotions in a safe and healthy way.
Absolutely gorgeous. And I was going to say, like, how do we motivate men to feel their feelings? And one of the
Well,
things
there's a lot.
is the more that, like, in my relationship, the more my husband feels his feelings, the more he can, like, meet me and hold me, and let more pleasure comes from that, right?
Absolutely.
Rather than there's that disassociated, like, just talking heads. It's like it doesn't land through the body, so it's like nice, but it's like numb. There's like, it really pleasure, I've learned. So I was thinking, how do we motivate men to feel their feelings?
Well, and how does that feel for you, Lara, if he is holding your emotions? What does that, what all the good things that come up in you, like your man is holding you, he can deal with it, you can bring all of yourself, and how does that feel?
Yeah, well, I can tell you what it feels like without that is nothing. I feel numb. And I always used to think, like, for a long time, I was like, I'm the problem. What's wrong? I used to think, what's wrong with me sexually? I felt like I was broken. And I did a lot of work on my, you know, sexual trauma and ancestral sexual trauma. And I did a lot of work on myself. But when it came to my husband, it was like, there was like, oh, well, I don't have any problems. There's no problem. And so I was always the one with the emotions and the struggle and the frustration not being met. And it was like hitting up against a brick wall of insult, going, there's no problem. There's no problem.
And trying to fix it.
And I'll fix it. Oh, do that. And it was very technical. Well, I'll technically do this, or I'll technically do that. And it wasn't meeting me. And I didn't know then what it was. I was frustrated. And then women we do all sorts of, like, games and sort of, like, to try and get our needs met. But anyway, what I found is the more he feels his feelings, the more he drops into his body, and the more the energy then can flow through and meet me. And it's like, extraordinary, because you almost think the opposite, right? But it's like the more he can hold himself and his emotions, then he can hold me and my emotions, and then he can hold me and who I am in my power. He's holding himself in his power, and then the pleasure cycle, like, begins. I mean, mind-blowing, life-changing pleasure. And I'm like, cannot believe it, because it's not what we're not taught this stuff, right? We're not taught like deep intimacy. And what was interesting is with that, he would want to sort of, he's trying to get, you know, it was like trying to get sex, or I was saying, you know, kind of I feel men leave themselves to try and get, and I can feel it on the receiving end when a man's in his power, sitting in it, or when he's trying to get something because he's not actually in his power. And it feels really not nice to be on the receiving end of that. But when men are sitting deep in themselves and they're holding themselves, and it's the most relaxing thing, and it makes me feel very safe. And then there's room for me to come towards, or room for me to really receive him, right? So, anyways, that's one of, you know, my experiences, which is it's weirdly so simple, so powerful, so beautiful, but so not what we're taught is even available as a thing. I just don't even think we realize it's possible.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's so powerful to hear that. I mean, I heard women share that similarly, but you shared it very, very clearly and beautifully now. Thank you. So there's a lot of things there. So first of all, we can only be as intimate with someone else as we are with ourselves. Cannot be any more intimate with someone else than we are with our own body, feelings, all of that, you know. And that's the same thing with the emotions themselves. So if we can't hold our own emotions, and our partner has, like, intense emotions flowing, like, how are we supposed to deal with it, you know? Like, there's not even the capacity to hold the own emotions. And what's holding the emotions? And that is really coming back down to some of the other things that you said, is awareness. It's your awareness. You are awareness. And if your awareness is not in your body, where your emotions are being processed, created, and flowing through, you know, emotional energy is very, like, close to physicality. It's not like out there somewhere and you feel far away. It's like really right there in your body. And that's where the suppressed emotions are held as well. and that's where the emotional energy is usually flowing. So that is really important to notice, that if we want to do that for our partner and be present with our partner, we have to learn how to be in our bodies and be with what's there. So to sit with it, be with it, not run from it, not distract from it, not dissociate from it, but be with it, not judging it, not being afraid of it, being with it, objectively observing it, not identifying with it, having empathy and compassion for ourselves, first of all, so we can then carry that outwards to someone else. And I love what you said about a man sitting in himself, a man being in his power, because what is most common that if like, let's just, oh, I would love to talk about this one. Let's say there's the situation, a man is on the street, gorgeous woman walking past, he feels attracted to her. What most men do is they stare, you know, and women, you feel that, so they stare. They're like, oh, I try that, she's not trying, like seeing it, but oh, that booty, and I'm like, oh yeah, they're just looking and staring, and literally energetically they are leaving themselves. Their awareness is over there, and it feels invasive. Even many women share to me, like when they're like just like penetrating them with their mind and their like eyes without permission. So it's like literally leave themselves. But bro, you also leave your power with that. So you go out of yourself, you're not there. And all that beautiful magic that you described there happens through polarity, in my experience. So if you want a 3-word description of what is like masculine energy, what is that? You know? And that is grounded, loving presence. That's it. It's not complicated, actually. You are in your body, including your sexuality, owning it. You're in your heart. You're grounded. You're present. You're there. And that's what liberates the feminine energy of receptivity, expression, and all that juiciness that comes from that. So it's just, but if that presence is not there, or you're not present, you're out there, or you want to try to get that woman or get something from your partner, get sex from your partner, take from her, blah, feel empty and are not rooted and present within your own body, then that just doesn't work. You know, she doesn't feel safe, right? It just doesn't feel safe. If there's a unclear intentions also, and just not a safe presence, it just feel like women feel that, right? Like especially conscious women, and as everyone's step by step waking up on the planet, the future of dating is not going to be pickup lines and manipulation techniques. It's just going to be honestly doing the work.
100%. And I will say that we know that we can feel, and what happens to feminine energy is shutdown and lockdown. You don't feel safe, but also like you're not allowed in, right? There's sort of like, it's almost like the opposite happens. And so let's like just map this out for a minute, because I think this is one of the things that I feel men don't like often understand. And so let's say that he's walking down the street, or he sees the beautiful woman, or there's someone, something he desires and wants is outside of him, right? How would you coach him on that? What does he need to do in order to actually draw that thing he wants towards him?
Well, first of all, I want to address that most men, like the church and all that stuff is played part in this, that desire is linked to sin and shame. And that's like that guilt, you know, for your desire. But I want to remind you that desire is the divine speaking through you, that it wants to express itself through you by experiencing that. Boom. So that's a whole shift. So it's not like you're doing a sin by doing that, but we have to be like, have some like nuance. There's a nuance in this, which is when you're still coming from a distorted way of approaching life, women, sex, and all that stuff, that desire is often not going to express in its purity as it is usually wanting to come through. It's going to express through all your fears, coping mechanisms, and all that that stuff, you know. So it's important to make sure, I'm not just max at this, so I'm just gonna, you know, wildly just follow my uncontrolled instincts and urges, and just, no, that's not what I mean. But the first thing I want to address with this is really to remember that desire is not a sin, and the essence of that desire is actually the divine universe, God, however you want to call it, wanting to express itself through you by, let's say, writing that book, meeting that woman, expressing yourself in that way, experiencing that experience, you know, and that is a very important thing, yeah, for that.
Yes, that's beautiful. And so so if we're talking about that, the men, power, and healthy masculinity, and what it means to be like that healthy masculine power.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, like, what do you know about that now, where you're sitting, what that even means? Because we're in so much distortion around, you know, sexuality and like masculinity. There's so much historical hurt and harm that, you know, ancestral trauma we're talking about. There's created a lot of distortion. And we're having to like work through a lot of confusion, right?
Yeah.
What would you say, like, what is, from your definition where you sit now, what is healthy masculine power, healthy masculine sexuality?
Yes, that is a beautiful question. So first of all, I want to address real quick what is unhealthy masculinity and where that comes from. Because most men, including me, did not grow up with a like healthy male role model, embodying powerful, heart-connected masculinity. Nope, it's usually not there. And then there's either like usually two things happening. Either men dissociate from their masculinity because they're like, oh shit, that's toxic, blah blah blah, I just hurt people when I'm in that energy, or they just fully go in there and even like exaggerate that compensation stuff of not feeling enough, and just then actively become like quote unquote toxic or like hurtful with that. And all that is coming from the same thing. So it's just you can call it like a passive expression of the shadow of masculinity, which is like weakness and just dissociating and not really being in the masculine energy and going more in the feminine, especially in the spiritual. I did that once, so I know how that is, and it's very much not empowering and it wasn't healthy for me. And then on the other hand is like this, like just overcompensate that stuff, hustle, grind, push and smash and just run, just walk over, you know, just, how do you say, like leave burned soil behind. I don't know the English translation of this stuff, but you're just causing so much damage with that. If you're just like, no, I'll just deny that that's happening and I'll just keep pushing forward and prove myself, just causing so much trouble. So that is of course unhealthy. Yeah. And then we can look at what is healthy masculinity, how you get there, you know, because healthy masculinity in my definition includes a couple of things. It includes, first of all, both aspects of masculinity. There's the light masculine, which is the soul aspect of masculine energy, and then there's the dark masculine, which is not bad or evil, it's just the physical body animal aspect of masculinity, and that's where a lot of power lies and where most men are not tapped into. Most importantly, also because of the lack of this initiation ritual where they have to tap into that. But because it's not always fluffy and puffy and comfortable, but it's powerful and needed. And the reason why shades of gray and stuff like that is sold, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of copies and whatever, is because the feminine especially craves the dark masculine power, sexual power, leadership, like just like purpose, like drive, and just like, you know, real physical male power. It's craved, but there's not really a healthy, the world does not really have seen a lot of healthy dark masculine energy. You know, you can see a lot of distorted stuff, let's say like shades of gray. There's stuff like that turns people on because there's something there that they're craving that actually is important, but it's just, again, an immature shadow expression of that. I have watched one thing of that or whatever, but it's just like the shadow. So it's about addressing the light masculine, which is the consciousness part, and the dark, which is the body part, in a healthy way. And as the last piece, to also, what makes masculinity also healthy is to be connected to your own feminine energy. Because if you're only in your masculine, That's just not healthy. You've probably seen the yin and yang symbol. The feminine has the essence of the masculine in it, and the masculine has the essence of the feminine in it, and it's balanced. Not meaning you're 50-50. Every human being is different, how their natural core is, how much of each energy they embody and in what way. But if we are only in our masculine energy, we're just like, go, 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 we just burn out. I had burnout, severe burnout with 26. And I know what I'm talking about. Been working 16 hours days and all that stuff for 7 days a week for 10 months straight. And then I was just burnt out with all the stuff I did before. So healthy masculinity, to bring it all together, is addressing all aspects of masculinity. Yeah, to find out, you know, how can I get into a healthy embodiment of dark masculine energy, which is, for example, practical things like setting boundaries, asserting yourself, you know, being really firm and clear, also taking with permission and enjoy it, you know, fucking enjoy it. Like, and, you know, like, take your woman with her permission. Yeah, that's a different thing. Like, to really have that intensity also, but with heart. That is I need to bring all of this back down to one word, it's empathy. What makes masculinity then healthy, you know, the masculine power, if you're already in that power, then empathy is the next step. Because then you're connected to emotions, you're connected to the feminine, you are conscious of what your actions cause in the world, you're taking responsibility for that, and you're tapped in, you're feeling the impact that you're having. So you can't just like run around and, you know, hurt people all the time, because you feel the impact. And for myself, I can say the worst pain that is there for me is when I get to realize that I was unconscious and really hurt someone I really love. Like, that's the worst for me personally. So and when you're tapped in with your heart and your power, you're moving that way, and you're not doing that, at least not more than absolutely necessary for your growth path.
Wow, so powerful, so beautiful. And I'm listening, and you know, we've got a lot of work to do, don't we? There's a lot of healing to do, there's a lot of feeling to do, and detangling of old ways of being and that kind of unhealthy modeling, and waking up to what's possible. And it is hard when it's not modeled, or we can't see it in the world, or you look at it and you just see this, we call it toxic masculine or wounded masculine, and that playing out.
Immature, I call it.
Immature masculine. But that immature masculine is manifesting in rape and sexual violence and pedophilia and
war,
horrendous violence everywhere. And so, and I learned that, you know, that a lot as a healer, like so many of my clients have experienced sexual violence, sexual trauma, and all sorts of violence. And there's just so much violence in sort of distorted version of that. So I'm so grateful to you and the work that you have done for yourself. I deeply honor you. And I'm so grateful for the space that you're holding for other men to do this work. I deeply honor you too, because it's so needed, it's required, and it takes immense courage, because it has to it's vulnerable, right? It requires vulnerability, and to be like, I need help and I need support. And I can't do this by myself, actually. And that's not a weakness. That's a strength, isn't it?
That is strength. The ability to feel and share your vulnerability is strength, a sign of true strength. And that includes, for men, I knew I had problems asking for help in the past, but I didn't for the last, I don't know how many years, because I noticed that I needed support. I was like, was not going to figure out all that trauma, all that stuff by myself. So I was working with people and I was asking for support, and that is not weakness. You know, I'm not saying, you know, ask your woman to run your business like your partner, or just be the man in the relationship and support you with that, or be vulnerable, quote unquote, with women. There's another important nuance with this. Don't dump your shit on your partner. Don't dump it on her. Like, in all your deepest insecurities about like finances and all that stuff. Like, don't dump it on her. That's where your brothers are for. You know, to really have a safe space of conscious men where you can bring all that vulnerability and all that stuff, you know, so you don't have to bring it to your partner. But still, also her, in certain things you can ask for support, but it's more like really addressing that thing. What do I, for example, want to develop? Let's say healthy masculinity. Well, then let's get some support on that, you know, because it's the struggling lone wolf type of approach I tried it in the past and just causes unnecessary suffering for in my experience, you know, a lot.
Yeah, it's just not effective. We need each other.
Not
Like
effective, yeah.
we need to connect with other human beings.
We're interdependent beings, yeah.
Yeah, I've learned that the hard way too with my lone wolf as well. So,
Me too. So speaking
yeah,
from experience.
exactly. And so for any men listening who are ready to take that next maybe vulnerable and slightly scary, uncomfortable step, and they maybe have no idea, they can't see the wood for the trees, they just know they're sick and tired of struggling and suffering on their own, and they want to have a taste of some of the stuff we've been talking about and attract in, you know, what they really want. What would you say, what's like the next best step? What do you have on offer for men to come and dive a little bit deeper with you, Max?
That's a good question. So I would invite you, if you're listening to this, and this kind of makes sense for you, you know, you identified yourself in some of these things, and you're like, yeah, I think it would be good to look at that, or I am ready to like take responsibility and work on that, you know. Then I invite you to get yourself my free video coaching. So that free video coaching that I'm inviting you into is called Unleashing the Power of Masculinity in Life, Love, and Sex. And in there, you're going to learn about empowered masculinity, yeah, how you can conquer these struggles, yeah, at their root cause, how you can unleash your potential as a man. And also, as a second point, you will learn how to create irresistible attraction with women, yeah, but by being authentic, not by faking stuff. And how to have unshakable self-confidence, also with the women that you really desire. Because often men, like, we are like, oh yeah, I'm kind of confident, but then there's this wow woman crossing your way, and you're just not finding the confidence to approach her, or you're just like wobbling all over the place because she's revealing what you're not aware of within yourself. And I'll show you how you can really develop that authentic, unshakable confidence that will also not leave you in these moments. And another thing that we didn't get to speak about right here, but I want to share with you, and I will share in this free video coaching with you, how you can break through the biggest single barrier to your fulfilled sex life. And I'll share with you how to last for hours in bed. So you have the capacity also on this level to have a fulfilled sex life, to have satisfaction yourself, and for your partner to be truly satisfied.
Amazing. So they just click on that link and can access that free video training, which sounds absolutely phenomenal. And I just want to say, like, I've lived and experienced the transformation that Max is talking about in my marriage and my personal life, going from really unhappy sex life, like everything's kind of okay on the surface, you should be grateful, you should feel fulfilled, deep thing missing, to having absolutely mind-blowing, incredibly pleasurable sex, intimacy, relationship that goes on for hours and hours. And it literally, I didn't even know that was a thing that was possible. So what Max is talking about is ready and available for you if you are ready to choose it. And you have to do the inner work. You got to go within, and it's available, and it's incredible, because it's quite mind-blowing, literally, isn't it? Because it's not necessarily what you've been taught, what you think, and then you start to watch the shift. It's remarkable. It really truly is.
And thank you for sharing, because many men, if they hear something like this, and in the past I was like, what, sex without ejaculating, what, sex for hours and hours? It's like, what? It's not what you've been taught in porn, right? So it's like but it's real, you know. Maybe you try to read a Mantak Chia book and try around, and it didn't work. But I'll explain to you in that free coaching what's that way there and how you can manage that. So
amazing.
Yes.
And just like from a female point of view as well, is that I think when men really embody that, it becomes less about technique and more about energy.
Oh, absolutely. Can I share about this for one moment?
Yes, please.
I don't want to expand the episode super long, but this is such an important key, because when you realize in sex that it is actually not about performing and the technique so much. It's like it's absolutely not about doing. It's absolutely not about performing. And technique is if you know a woman's body, it helps, but it is not about technique. It's actually much more the definition of true intimacy, and sexual intimacy, in my opinion, is two souls meeting through the bodies, the minds getting out of the way, and the divine letting its magic happen. You know, that's when the real juicy stuff happens. So you don't have to perform, try to do all these things. You just have to be clear, be there, and get out of the way.
It's extraordinary. It's truly mind-blowing.
A whole different approach. Let go of expectations, of pressure, and all that judgment and shame, and let the divine play.
It's amazing. So less is more. Less is more. And I also, just from the female point of view, want to say that I've also had to do this work, right? Balancing the masculine and feminine energy within myself for that yin and yang. And for two people, everyone's got to do the work. But when you start with yourself, it can change everything. And it's just like, be the invitation, go first, lead the way, and life will blow your mind what starts shifting and changing over time.
Absolutely.
So Max, thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom. You've worked hard to get to this place, to be able to hold and support men in this, and I'm so grateful to you, because it does take work, right? It's work, it's hard, it's harsh work, and it's worthy, very worthy work. And so thank you, and thank you to all the men who are choosing to step in to this process. It is truly life-changing, and I think really this is how we change the future, right? How we do things.
This is it. It starts within. Yeah. If you want to change the world, start with yourself, doing the work, healing. That's it.
Thank you so much. All my love. Speak to you soon.
Thank you.
So if this conversation has resonated with you and you are ready to take that next step to transform your life, your sex life, and step into your healthy masculine power, come and visit the link below to book your free place at Max's upcoming training and transform your life starting now.